The invitation no one expected. The morning sun was slow to rise over San Francisco, casting soft orange light across the sleek glass buildings of the tech district. Inside a quiet downtown cafe, a group of engineers were huddled around a laptop, laughing in low, mischievous tones. They were planning the closing act of their company's annual tech conference, and someone had just floated a ridiculous idea that made everyone burst into laughter. "What if we invited Keanu Reeves?" One of them chuckled. "Not to speak, but to sing," someone else added with a grin. "Imagine him singing in front of 5,000 people. It would go viral in seconds." The joke spiraled quickly. One intern too eager to impress actually drafted an email. It was written with mock formality and ended with a line that was meant to make everyone laugh again. "We understand you may not be a trained singer, but your presence alone would be legendary. Even if you just hum into the mic, the crowd will love it." And they sent it. The laughter died down after a few minutes, replaced by the noise of espresso machines and soft rock music from the speakers. No one gave the email another thought. Not really. But 3 days later, something unexpected happened. A short reply arrived. "Thank you. Sounds interesting. What day and time?" It was signed Keanu. For a long moment, nobody moved. The cafe fell to quiet, too small to contain the sudden realization of what they had done. They had invited one of the most private, respected, and gentle actors in the world as a joke, and he had said yes. The email thread went silent. The team sat frozen, unsure what to do next. The intern who sent the message looked like he might faint. The joke had become real, and now the joke was on them. Across town, Keanu Reeves sat in a modest hotel suite, sipping green tea and reading a script he wasn't quite sure he wanted to accept. The tech conference email had caught his eye not because it was clever, but because it was so oddly sincere. There was no arrogance, no showbiz polish, just an awkward, oddly charming request, and something inside him had stirred. He remembered something years ago, before the fame, before the cameras, and the silence that came after the tragedies of his life. He had sung, not for crowds, not for attention, just for someone who once sat across from him on the edge of a hospital bed, asking for lullabies when pain made sleep impossible. And so, he replied yes, but he didn't tell anyone why. The conference organizers were in a state of panic. They tried to craft a dignified follow-up message. They called his agency, his team, even offered to switch the segment to a speaking appearance instead. But Keanu's reply was clear. "I agreed to sing. That was the request. I'll do it." By the time word spread that Keanu Reeves would perform live at the Tech Summit, the ticket site crashed from demand. The CEO of the company issued a formal apology for the confusion, hoping to mask the fact that the invitation had started as a joke. The night before the performance, Keanu arrived at the venue. He walked quietly through the back entrance, carrying a guitar case slung over his shoulder. No entourage, no manager, just him. A young event volunteer spotted him and whispered, "Sir, do you need anything?" Keanu looked at her kindly and said, "Just a moment to sit, and maybe a cup of warm water." In a room filled with billionaires, venture capitalists, and social media influencers shouting over glasses of wine, he was the quietest person there. And yet, everyone felt his presence the moment he stepped in. The next morning came fast. The crowd filled the huge auditorium. Thousands of engineers, journalists, tech enthusiasts, and curious attendees packed the seats. Many were whispering theories. Maybe it's a prank. Maybe he'll just wave and walk off. Maybe it's deepfake Keanu. But when the lights dimmed and the host's voice echoed, "Please welcome Keanu Reeves," the room held its breath. He walked onto the stage slowly, guitar in hand, dressed in a simple black shirt and jeans. There was no flashy entrance, no background dancers, no fireworks, just him. He stood at the center, looked out at the sea of blinking screens and expectant eyes, and paused. You could hear a pin drop. Then he spoke, gently. "Thank you for having me. I heard you wanted me to sing, so I'll try." The crowd laughed nervously. Some phones were already up recording. Keanu adjusted the mic and sat on a single stool placed in the middle of the stage. Then he began to play. The first few chords were soft, almost unsure, but as he sang, something shifted in the air. It wasn't perfect. His voice trembled in places. It cracked once, but it was honest. It was raw, and the lyrics simple and poetic carried weight. They spoke of holding on through silence, of grieving without words, of walking alone, yet refusing to harden. No one expected that. The laughter was gone. The phones slowly lowered. Even the front row executives leaned in, their smiles fading into something quieter, something almost reverent. By the time the song ended, the audience didn't cheer. Not right away. They just sat there, quiet. Then slowly, people began to stand, one by one. No shouting, just silence, and then thunderous, honest applause. In the green room backstage, a producer wiped his eyes. "What just happened?" he whispered. But Keanu was already walking out the back door, guitar slung over his shoulder once again, nodding politely to the same volunteer who handed him warm water earlier. She looked at him, still overwhelmed. "You were amazing," she said. He smiled, barely, and replied, "Thank you. I just sang a memory." But the story didn't end there. The internet exploded. Clips of the performance flooded every platform, not because of vocal perfection, not because of showbiz glamour, but because it was real. One comment stood out beneath a video that went viral. "In a world full of noise, he gave us silence that spoke louder than anything." As the video spread, something else began to surface. An old photo. A younger Keanu, sitting beside a hospital bed, holding a guitar. A woman in the bed was smiling at him weakly, eyes closed, and people began to ask who was she? What had he sung back then? And why did he say yes to this after all these years? What no one knew was that the song he sang that day was the same song he wrote for her. Her name was Mia, and she was the reason he stopped singing for years. But now, something had awakened. Something unfinished, and the world was about to learn the rest. The name no one. Hard 2 days after the tech summit, the world was still buzzing. Clips of Keanu's performance had reached over 10 million views, and yet, in every video, the moment that stayed in people's hearts was not the voice, not even the song, but the pause. After he sang his last note, his eyes had softened, his head had bowed, and just before standing up, he whispered inanely. A few caught it. One of the comments said, "Did he say Mia?" Another wrote, "Replay 617. He says something soft." Theories started flooding Reddit and forums. Who was Mia? A fan? A lost love? A metaphor? Keanu had disappeared again. No press interviews, no statements. He went back to doing what he always did. After showing something vulnerable, he vanished into quiet. But one person couldn't ignore it. Her name was Lena. She was a music therapist from Seattle, and she had once worked at a private hospital over 20 years ago. She didn't attend the tech summit. She didn't even know it was happening, but someone sent her the video. And when she heard the name, she froze because 23 years ago there was a girl named Mia Young, barely 20, fighting a rare illness that caused constant pain. The world had forgotten her, but Keanu had not. Lena remembered the quiet actor who used to come every evening, not through the front doors, but through the emergency ramp. He never made noise, never asked for special treatment. He just sat beside the girl's bed, played soft chords, and sang always the same tune. Mia had said once, "When he sings, it doesn't hurt as much." No one knew who he was at first. He never used his full name, just said, "I'm a friend." But over time, nurses recognized him. He was already becoming famous. But the way he acted inside the hospital, you would think he was nobody. Brought books, tea, even her favorite chocolates from a shop across town. Never asked for thanks, just stayed for hours, sometimes reading, playing, laughing softly with her. When Mia passed away, it wasn't dramatic. No machines, no chaos, just a soft breath and his hands holding hers. After that, he didn't come back. The hospital staff never saw him again, and the song, the one he sang again at the tech summit, was her. Selena sat at her desk, holding her phone tightly. She had never told anyone this story. It felt too sacred, too personal. But now, the world was askance at night. She wrote a quiet blog post, just a few paragraphs, no big headline, just the truth. He sang that song for Mia. He wrote it for her. I know, because I was there. The post didn't go viral instantly, but it found its way to people who remembered being human. A journalist from a respected publication picked it up, Then a podcast host featured it soon. More and more people started piecing the puzzle together, and slowly a picture of a man with layers deeper than any movie role emerged. Wasn't just an actor. He was someone who had carried grief silently, who had once loved a girl the world never knew, and whose memory lived on in a song. Meanwhile, Keanu was in New Mexico filming a small indie project. The director respected his privacy. But one evening after the shoot, a crew member nervously approached him. "Sir," he said, "there's a podcast episode I think you should hear. It's about Mia." Keanu didn't say anything at first, but later that night, alone in his trailer, he listened. The voice of Lena came through his headphones, soft, warm, truthful. She didn't expose him. She honored him. When it ended, he sat in silence, eyes closed. Memories flooding back, remembered the way Mia used to look at the ceiling and say, "Promise me you'll never sing this for anyone else unless you really mean it." He had kept that promise. For over 20 years he never sang it again until that stage at the Tech Summit. Thought he was doing it just to face something inside himself. But now he realized something bigger was happening. Her story wasn't gone. She was no longer just a memory locked in his heart. She had become a voice in the world, soft but hardened. The world had listened. Next morning, Keanu sent a message to someone he hadn't spoken to in decades. It was line 8. Message simply said, "Thank you for remembering. May I call you?" And she said yes. What they spoke about that day would never be public. But something changed after that call, because a week later Keanu Reeves appeared again, this time not on a stage, not in a movie, but in a small music studio in Los Angeles. Was recording something and no one knew yet. But the song was not for fame, not for profit. It was for a promise. And when that recording would eventually be released, it would carry not just his voice, but hers, a voice that had once faded, now living again in every note of it. Before that moment could come, Keanu had to face someone else's Simeon from the past he never expected to see again. Simeon, who once told him you'll never be good enough for her. And that confrontation was about to change everything. Asterisk, the man who waited 20 years. The recording studio in Los Angeles was tucked between old buildings and tangled trees. It was quiet, almost invisible from the street. A place where forgotten songs were remembered again. Inside, Keanu sat alone in the soundproof booth. The guitar rested gently on his knee. He took a breath, closed his eyes, and began to play the same song, the same chords. But this time, something in his voice had changed. It wasn't just memory, it was something more, a kind of release, a surrender. Outside the booth, the sound engineer, a woman named Dahlia, watched with silent respect. She had recorded hundreds of artists before, but never had she seen someone play like this, not with show but with soul. It was as if every string on the guitar carried a part of his grief. When the recording ended, there was a long silence. Keanu removed his headphones and looked through the glass. Dahlia gave him a small nod. "We got it," she said softly, but just as he stepped out of the booth, a man was waiting in the hallway, older, well-dressed, with sharp eyes that held something cold beneath their calm. "Keanu, stop it." The man didn't smile. He didn't offer a handshake. Instead, he said one word, "Why?" Keanu didn't answer right away. His eyes narrowed slightly. Recognition settled over his face. A slow wave of something old and heavy. The man continued, "After all these years, you sing that song again, in public, on stage." Keanu's voice was low, calm. "I didn't know you'd care. Don't play that," the man snapped. Stepping closer, "You knew what it meant. To her, to me." The tension between them filled the small hallway like thick fog. The air grew tight. Even Dahlia sensed something wrong and stepped back quietly. The man's name was Charles. He had been Mia's father, a powerful lawyer respected in his circles, and for a long time, a wall between his daughter and the life she wanted and never liked. Keanu, not back then, not no. Believed fame was empty, that actors were masks without depth. And he told Mia, again and again, he won't be there when it matters. But Keanu had stayed until the end. Charles hadn't been at the hospital when Mia passed. He came 2 days later to Leighton. When he found out that Keanu had been there every day, holding her hand, reading to her, singing to her, he felt something he never admitted. And now, after 2 decades of silence, he had come here not to make peace, but to challenge the one thing he could not control. Mia's memory kept alive, not by him, but by the man he once pushed away. Keanu looked at him for a long time before answering. His voice was soft but steady. "She asked me to sing that song only when I truly meant it. I never did until now." Charles's expression didn't change, but his hands clenched slightly. You think singing her song in front of a crowd of strangers is meaning it? No. Keanu said, I think carrying it in silence for 20 years and still remembering every note is meaning it. The hallway stayed silent to men bound by love for the same person, but separated by pride, grief, and years of silence. Finally, Charles spoke again, but this time his voice cracked slightly. You don't understand. When she chose you, I lost her before she even died. Keanu's eyes softened. He didn't speak for a moment, then he said quietly, she never stopped loving you. She just wanted you to love her, without conditions. Charles turned his head away for a moment. He seemed much older, smaller, a father who had run out of time. Left without another word. The door clicked shut behind him, and Keanu stood alone again in the hallway, his reflection staring back at him. From the glass window, Dahlia finally spoke. Was that her father? Keanu nodded yes. You okay? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked down at his hands, fingers still trembling slightly from the song. I think, he said slowly, it's the first time I ever saw him cry. That night the studio sent the final mix of the song to Keanu. He listened to it once, then sent it to someone else. Lina included a short message. This was never about going public. It was just for her, and for the ones who still remember her. But Lina wasn't the only one who received it. Keanu also made a private upload of the song. Unlisted, no comments, no title, just a single video, a black screen, and his voice, and he sent it to one more person. Charles. A week passed, no reply, until one evening, Keanu received a letter, handwritten, no return address, just a folded piece of paper. It read, I listened. I wept. I hated you for being there when I wasn't. But now, I thank you for not letting her disappear. No signature, but it didn't need one. The days that followed were quiet, but something inside Keanu had shifted. He wasn't haunted by the silence anymore, because the song had finally left his chest and reached the ears it was meant for. But then came a knock at his door. Not a fan, not a journalist, not even a friend, a stranger, a young woman holding a photo in her hands. And when Keanu saw the photo, his breath caught in his throat, because the woman in the photo, beside a hospital bed, smiling through pain, was Mayan. Standing next to her was another girl, one holding the photo. Now I think, she said gently, we're connected in a way you might not expect. And her next words would uncover something even Keanu didn't know, a secret that Mia never told him, a truth buried with her until now. The hidden letter. The room was silent. Keanu stood still, his eyes fixed on the photo the young woman held in the picture. Mia was smiling faintly from her hospital bed, one hand resting on a small blanket over her legs, her other arm around a younger girl, a teenager, barely 13, dark hair, bright eyes, the same shape as Miss. Keanu reached out and touched the corner of the photo, his fingers trembling slightly. He had never seen it before. The girl holding the photo looked up at him, her voice quiet but steady. My name is Alara, she said. Mia was my sister. Keanu blinked slowly, trying to take in the words. They didn't make sense at first. She never told me, he said softly. She didn't tell anyone, Alara replied. Our family was complicated. Our parents didn't want anyone to know about me. I was born years later, to a different mother. Mia used to call me her quiet secret. She placed the photo gently on the table, then pulled out an envelope, old, creased, sealed. I was told to give this to you if I ever found you, she said. Keanu hesitated, then took the envelope. He turned it over slowly in his hands. His name was written in blue ink on the front. Just one word. Keanu's chest felt tight. He sat down on the edge of the sofa, opened the envelope carefully, and pulled out a folded piece of paper. The handwriting was familiar, soft, round. Maish took a breath and began to read. My dear Keanu, I don't know if you'll ever get this. I don't know if Alara will ever find you. But if she does, then I know one thing, I was right to trust you. By the time you read this, I will be gone. I think we both knew that day would come too soon. But I don't want your last memory of me to be that hospital bed. I want you to know what you meant to me, that you were the first person who didn't see me as a patient. You looked at me like I was still whole, like my pain wasn't my name. You brought light into the darkest room of my life, and you gave me something no one else could give, peace. I kept a secret from you, Keanu, and I'm sorry for that. It wasn't because I didn't trust you. It was because I was afraid of making your life harder. Alara is my half-sister. She's bright and strong and full of questions. When I was sick I wrote her stories, letters, songs. I told her about you. But I also asked her not to search for you until she was ready, until she was old enough to understand why I loved you the way I did. If she's with you now, then it means she's ready. I want you to promise her one thing. Don't let the world tell her that being different is something to hide. Protect her the way you once protected me. I love you. In this life, and whatever comes next. Keanu didn't move for a long time. His hands rested on the letter. His eyes stayed on the floor, and Alara sat across from him quietly. She didn't cry. She had cried enough in her life already. Instead, she waited patiently, gently. After a while, Keanu looked up. His voice was low. How long have you had this? Since I was 16, she said. My mother gave it to me on my birthday. She told me Mia had written it before she passed, but she never told me much more than that. Why now? Alara looked out the window. Because the moment I saw you on that stage, singing that song, I knew it was time. Keanu stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the slow-moving clouds. He remembered the hospital ceiling, the way Mia used to stare at it, while he sang as if she could see something beyond it. He turned back to Alara. You said she wrote you stories. Alara nodded. Dozens. She had this notebook, full of things she never got to do, dreams, made-up adventures, even a song we started together. Keanu tilted his head. You write music too? Alara smiled for the first time. A little. I'm not very good. You don't have to be good. He said you just have to feel it. The moment hung between them, a fragile bridge forming, not out of blood, not out of past, but out of shared memory. And then Keanu made a decision, one that would change both their lives. Will you come with me? He asked. Alara looked surprised. Where? Someplace quiet, where we can finish what she started. 3 days later, they arrived in Northern California, a quiet town near the coast. Mist rolled over the hills in the early morning, and a small cabin set near the edge of a forest. Keanu had bought it years ago, never told anyone. He came here when the world felt a loud no. He was opening its doors for someone else, for Mia's sister, for the last piece of a promise he had left inside. The cabin smelled of cedar and old books. A fireplace crackled softly, and on the table Keanu placed the photo, the letter, and a blank notebook. Handed it to Alara. Let's write her song, he said. They worked slowly, no pressure, no deadline. Keanu strummed chords. Alara hummed melodies. They argued, they laughed sometimes. They cried, but each note, each line brought Mia closer, not as a memory, but as a living presence in the room. And as the song took shape, Keanu felt something inside him begin to settle. For years, he had carried her in silence. Now he was releasing her through sound. The final line of the song was written by Alara, and when she sang it, Keanu felt his eyes fill. You were the whisper in the dark, the light I never lost. The next step was never planned. They hadn't intended to share the song publicly, but one night Keanu played it for Dahlia, his sound engineer. French listened, then said quietly, this needs to be heard. And so they recorded it this time, not just Keanu on guitar, but Alara on vocals, to voices. One memory, one love. Release was quiet, no press, no ads, just a title. For Maya. Within a day, it had over 1 million plays. The comment section was filled with stories of grief, love, healing, but also a question: woe is Alara? And Keanu knew sooner or later the world would want the full story. But before that, he received a message, a video file. No sender opened it and saw something he never expected: a home video. Mia in a hospital gown, laughing, speaking directly to the camera. And her final words before the screen went dark were, if he's watching this, tell him it was never just a song. It was always a doorway, and he just opened it. Keanu sat in silence, his hand over his heart. The past was no longer a ghost, it had become a voice. When the world came knocking morning after the song for Mia was quietly released, Keanu woke up to a phone buzzing endlessly. Didn't like keeping his phone on, but last night, just before sleeping, he had a feeling something was coming, and at his inbox was full messages from friends, old producers, record labels, journalists, even a famous director. They all wanted the same thing: an interview, a feature, a documentary, a performance. The song had touched people deeply, but fame had grabbed it with both hands. In social media, the hashtags were everywhere: hashtag FORMIA, hashtag Keanu sings, hashtag ELARA. The world wanted more, but not everyone came with kindness, and blogs began digging who was Alara. Was she really Mia's sister? Was the story real, or was it all crafted for attention? Samin posted an old picture of Alara and tried to twist the caption, saying she looked too healthy to camera ready to be someone who had lost a sister. Keanu saw it, and his chest filled with quiet anger. She was still just a girl barely out of her teens, and now the world was watching her, questioning her. But Alara didn't cry, not this time. She had grown strong from years of being invisible. Still, the pressure grew. A producer offered her a solo contract, another offered to turn Mia's story into a movie. Streaming platforms reached out. A manager even said, "You could be the next big thing if we shape the story right." She turned them all down. But one message stuck in her mind from a woman she had never met. "My daughter passed 2 years ago. Your song helped me breathe again." And another, "My brother died from cancer. The last thing he listened to was your voice." Those words meant more than any contract. But still the noise grew. People camped outside the cabin. Drones flew overhead. Paparazzi appeared in the woods. One even shouted at Keanu while he was chopping wood near the tree line, "Why now? Why come back with this song?" Keanu didn't answer. He just walked back inside, silent as always. But the pressure took its toll. Alara began sleeping less. Her hands trembled when she held a pen. And one evening she sat on the cabin steps and whispered, "Maybe I wasn't supposed to be part of this." Keanu sat beside her quietly, watching the last orange light fade over the hills. "Mia asked you to find me," he said, "not to become famous, not to be a symbol, but to finish something she couldn't finish alone." Alara looked at him, eyes wide and wet. "But how do I carry all this?" Keanu was silent for a moment, then placed his hand gently on hers. "You don't carry it. We carry it together." The next day, they made a decision. No more interviews, no appearances, no studio deals. But one thing they would do was share Mia's notebook. Not the whole thing, just the parts she wanted the world to see. Dreams, drawings, lyrics. Keanu scanned each page himself. Alara chose the ones that felt the most real, and they created a website, simple, soft-colored, no ads. They called it The Quiet Promising. The world responded, not with noise, but with letters, thousands of them, from children, from elders, from soldiers, from people grieving someone they never got to say goodbye. Toned. Then a letter arrived from someone neither of them expected. Charlie's father. His letter was long, handwritten carefully. Folded inside was a page from a courtroom legal pad, and on it a copy of a will. His will. He had made a decision. He was donating his entire estate, every property, every account, to a foundation in Mia's name. "I spent a lifetime building walls. Maybe this is how I begin to tear them down." He wrote at the bottom. He added, "Tell Alara her sister loved her more than any of us ever truly understood." When Alara read it, she didn't cry right away. She stood for a long time looking out at the trees, then whispered, "I wish she was here to see this." Keanu stood behind her. "She is, but not everyone welcomed the healing." The news anchor called it another Hollywood emotional stunt. Another article accused Keanu of exploiting personal tragedy for public redemption. It hurt, but it didn't stop them. They knew what was real. They knew what had been shared quietly, without stage lights. But one moment was about to change everything. Again, it happened at a small high school in Oregon. A teacher had played for Mia in her classroom. A student who hadn't spoken in weeks raised her hand and whispered, "Can we write something like that too?" Soon every student began writing letters to the people they missed, grandparents, pets, friends lost in accidents. Some left them folded on the wall of the classroom. Others mailed them, and then the teacher sent one envelope to Keanu and Alara. Inside were 82 small notes, each one folded, each one written by a young hand, each one beginning with, "Dear Mia, we heard your song." Keanu read every one, so did Alara. They spent hours on the floor of the cabin, letters scattered like autumn leaves. And then Keanu looked up and said, "We need to do something more." What they did next surprised everyone. They didn't hold a concert. They didn't go on tour. They held a workshop for grief, for healing, for song. No tickets, no press, just a wooden hall in a small town with chairs arranged in a circle. People came from everywhere, not because they wanted to meet a movie star, but because they felt seen. Keanu spoke gently. Alara played softly. Others shared poems, stories, memories. And in the end, they sang for Mia together, not like a performance, but like a whisper from hearts still learning how to mend. When the last note faded, an old man stood up and said, "This isn't a song. This is a shelter." And everyone knew he was right. But that night, as they walked back to the cabin, Keanu's phone buzzed. with a call from someone he hadn't spoken to in years. A woman's voice came through, calm, familiar, a friend from the past. You need to see something, she said. There's more to Mia's story, something even you don't know. Keanu stopped walking. The wind rustled the trees, and his heart beat slower. What do you mean? A scared voice replied. She left something behind, something not even Alara knows about, something only I was trusted to keep. Keanu whispered, what is it? Her answer made him stop breathing for a moment. A recording. Mia recorded something before she died. A message for you. The last voice. Keanu didn't sleep that night after the phone call. He sat on the porch of the cabin, watching the stars, his guitar resting beside him unplayed. He had thought the song was the end. He had thought the letter was the last word, but now there was something else, something Mia had left behind. A voice, frozen in time. The woman who had called him her name was Sophia. She had once been Mia's closest friend from college. After Mia got sick, they stayed in touch by voice notes, letters, late-night phone calls filled with laughter and silence. Sophia had kept something safe for all these years, something Mia had asked her to guard until the time was right. 2 days later, Keanu flew to Vancouver, a quiet house by the water, a garden filled with wind chimes. Sophia met him at the door, older now, gray hair tucked into a braid, eyes kind and steadish. Didn't hug him, they just looked at each other, and both knew some people don't need words to say welcome. Inside the house, she led him to a wooden box, small lock edge, handed him the key and said softly, Mia recorded it 1 week before she passed. She was tired, but she was clear. She said it was for you, but only when you were ready to forgive yourself. Keanu held the box in his hands, his heart heavier than it had been in years. He nodded, then opened it slowly. Inside was a single cassette tape labeled with one word, Keanu. A small player sat beside it, still working, old but untouched. Pressed play. The sound of soft static filled the room, then a deep breath, and her voice, light, slightly raspy, gentle, and unmistakably hers. Hi Keanu, if you're hearing this, then I guess the world found you again, and you let it in. Thank you. I'm not sure how much time I have, but I wanted you to know some things before I go, things I never got to say. First, I loved you, not like the movies, not like the stories, but like the way light loves the leaves, quiet, steady, always there. You never owed me your time, your songs, your presence, but you gave them anyway. When I asked you not to sing that song again, unless it truly meant something, I meant it, because I didn't want you to carry me like a weight. I wanted you to carry me like a part of the wind, gentle and free. You once asked me if I was scared to die. I said no, but the truth is I was scared to be forgotten. But now I know I won't be, because you'll remember me, not with sadness, but with music. And maybe someday, if you're really brave, you'll sing the song and share the silence it leaves behind, and maybe even find someone who hears me in it. Maybe her name is Alara. If she finds you, tell her I loved her more than words, more than breath. I want her to sing to both of you together, because that's how songs become something more. That's how people live forever. The tape ended. No music, just silence. Keanu sat still, his eyes closed, tears slipping down slowly. No shaking, no sobs, just quiet release. Sophia left him alone, a cup of tea steaming beside the window, and he stepped outside. Hours later, the sun was beginning to fall, and in the golden light he felt something warm inside his chest. Mia's voice, still alive, not in pain, not in memory, but in motion. When Keanu returned to the cabin, Alara was waiting. She had been painting in the woods. A small canvas with colors that looked like sunrise. He told her everything, played the recording. They sat together, no words, for a long time. Then Alara said, I think it's time. Keanu looked at her. Time for what? For one last performance, not for the cameras, not for the world, just for her. He nodded slowly. A week later, on a soft summer night, they walked into an empty amphitheater in Northern California. The stage was bare, no lights, no audience, as 2 microphones, and the sky above. He set up a small recorder and stood beside each. Athirila began, her voice steady and pure. Keanu followed, his voice rougher but full of truth. He sang for Mia one last time, but this version had something more. The message from the tape, the weight of every letter, every tear, every silence that once filled the space between chords. And when they reached the final line, they sang it in unison. You were the whisper in the dark, the light I never lost. The last note faded. The wind moved gently through the trees, and the world felt still. Keanu looked up at the sky, smiled softly, and whispered, you were never forgotten. The recording was never released, never uploaded, never shared, but it didn't need to be, because Some songs, some stories are meant to live not in speakers, but in heart's end. So Mia lived on it just as a girl who once loved or a patient who once smiled through pain bit. As a voice, a song, a promise sequiet strong eternal.